Our today topic is nationalism in India. Explain the idea of Satyagraha according to Gandhiji. So when Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in 1915 from South Africa, Gandhiji's novel method of mass agitation is known as Satyagraha. Satyagraha was based on truth. Gandhiji believed that if the cause is true, then there is no need for physical force. If the struggle is against injustice, and there is no need for physical force to fight the oppressor. Satyagrahi can win the battle through non-violence. Truth was bound to ultimately triumph. Gandhiji believed that dharma of non-violence could unite all India. Explain the effects of worldwide economic depression on India towards late 1920s. In 19th century, colonial India had become an exporter of agriculture goods and an importer of. The worldwide economic depression immediately affected Indian trade. Exports and imports nearly halved between 1928 and 1934. International prices crashed. Prices in India also plunged. Peasants producing for world market were worse hit. Agricultural prices fell. The colonial government refused to reduce revenue demands. Indebtedness increased for peasants. Example, jute producer of Bengal. So in these depression years, India became an exporter of precious metals, notably gold. Explain any three facts about the new economic situation created in India by the First World War. The First World War was dramatically a new economic situation in India. Manchester imports into India declined as British mills were busy with war production to meet the needs of the army, paving the way for the Indian mills to supply for the huge home market. As the war prolonged, Indian factories were called upon to supply war needs. New factories were set up, new workers were employed, everyone was made to work longer hours. Cotton production collapsed. Exports of cotton clothes from Britain fell dramatically. Local industrialists gradually consolidated their position, capturing the home market. How did the plantation workers understand the idea of Swaraj? Explain. For the plantation workers of Assam, Swaraj meant freedom to move freely. They were confined to particular space and they were not able to keep link with their native villages. Under the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, plantation workers were not allowed to leave their tea gardens without permission. When they heard of non-cooperation movement, thousands of workers defied authorities. They left the plantations and headed home. Explain the circumstances under which Gandhiji decided to call off the civil disobedience movement in 1931. Gandhiji decided to call off the civil disobedience movement in 1931 because political leaders like Abdul Ghaffar Khan were arrested. More than 1 lakh people were arrested. Government responded with brutal repression. Peaceful satyagrahis were arrested. Women and children were beaten up. It resulted in an uprising in Peshawar in 1930. Industrial workers in Sholapur attacked police post. In Chittagong, the revolutionaries captured the armory and a pitched battle was fought between government troops and the revolutionaries. In such a situation, Gandhiji called off the movement and the Gandhi-Irwin Pact was signed. Explain the reaction of Indian people against the Rowlatt Act passed through the Imperial Legislative Council in 1919. Reaction of Indian people against the Rowlatt Act of 1919. Rallies were organized. Railway workshops and shops closed down. There was possession in Amritsar. It provoked widespread attack on buses, post office, railway station, telegraph lines. Gandhiji held Hartal on 6th April. The peaceful demonstration in Jallianwala Bagh led to a violent movement all across the country. How was the Rowlatt Act opposed by the people in India? Explain with examples. Gandhiji, who had formed a Satyagraha Sabha earlier, called for a countrywide protest against the proposed Rowlatt Act. 6th April 1919 was observed as a National Humiliation Day. Gandhiji wanted a non-violent civil disobedience against such unjust laws. Hartals and rallies were organized. Workers went on strike in railway workshops. Shops closed down. The movement was non-violent. It proved to be effective. Explain 3 effects of the non-cooperation movement on the economy of India. Foreign goods were boycotted. Liquor shops were picketed and foreign clothes were burned. The import of foreign clothes halved between 1921 and 1922. Its value was dropped from rupees 102 crore to rupees 57 crore. Many merchants and traders refused to trade in foreign goods or finance foreign trade. People began discarding imported clothes. The production of Indian textile mills and handloom went up. use of khadi was popularized? Explain any three reasons for the lukewarm response of some Muslim organization to the civil disobedience movement. Three reasons for lukewarm response of some Muslim organization to civil disobedience movements were: after the decline of non-cooperation Caliphate movement, a large section of Muslims felt alienated from the Indian National Congress. The visible and open association of Congress with Hindu religious nationalist groups like the Hindu Mahasabha in mid-1920s made the Muslims suspicious of Congress motives. The frequent communal clashes not only deepened the distance between the two communities, but there was an important difference over the question of representation. How did the rich peasants and women take part in the civil disobedience movement? Role of rich peasants: being the producers of commercial crops, they were hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As their cash income reduced, they found it impossible to pay the government revenues. These rich peasants became ardent supporters of the civil disobedience movement. For them, fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues. Role of women: women participated in the protest marches, manufactured salt, and picketed foreign clothes and liquor shops. Many women went to jail. Women who participated in the civil disobedience movement came from high caste families in urban areas. Women who participated in the civil disobedience movement came from high caste families in urban areas and rich peasant households in rural areas. Why did non-cooperation movement gradually slow down in cities? Explain any three reasons. The non-cooperation movement gradually slowed down in cities for a variety of reasons. Khadi cloth was more expensive than milk cloths, and poor people could not afford to buy it. As a result, they could not boycott milk clothes for too long. Alternative Indian institutions were not there, which could be used in place of the British ones. So students and teachers began trickling back to government schools, and lawyers joined back work in government courts. Describe the role of peasants in Awadh in non-cooperation movement. The peasants movement demanded reduction of revenue, abolition of beggar, and social boycotts of these landlords. Describe the role of peasants in Awadh in the non-cooperation movement. The peasants movement demanded reduction of revenue, abolition of beggar, and social boycott of these landlords. In many places, Nai Dhobi Bandhs were organized to deprive landlords of the service of even washermen and barbers. In 1920, Jawaharlal Nehru began talking to the villagers and formed Awadh Kisan Sabha. Within a month, 300 branches had been set up in the villages. As the movement spread in 1921, the houses of talakdars and merchants were attacked, bazaars were looted, and grain hoards were taken over. Explain the three measures taken by the British administration to repress the movement started against the Royal Act. British officials were alarmed by the popular upsurge. They feared that the lines of communication, such as railways and telegraph, might get disrupted. The British government started even stronger repressive measures. Local leaders were picked up. Gandhiji was barred from entering Delhi. On 10th April 1919, the police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession. This provoked widespread attacks on banks, post offices, and railway stations. Martial law was imposed. Describe any three suppressive measures taken by the British administration to clamp down on nationalists. Suppressive measures taken by the British administration were: the fear that the lines of communication such as railways and telegraph might get disrupted. The British government started even stronger repressive measures. Local leaders were picked up. Gandhiji was barred from entering Delhi. On 10th April 1919, the police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession. This provoked widespread attacks on banks, post offices, and railway stations. Martial law was imposed. General Dyer took command. Government replied with further brutalities. The people of Punjab were made to crawl on the streets and salute all the sahibs. Some were put in open cages and flogged. Newspapers were banned and their editors were arrested. A reign of terror followed. Describe the main features of the Salt March. Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. On 31st January 1930, he sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands, one of which was the demand to abolish salt tax. Salt was one of the most essential food items consumed by the rich and poor alike. and a tax on it was considered an oppression on the people by the British government. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was an ultimatum, and if demands were not fulfilled by 11th March, he had threatened to launch a civil disobedience campaign. Describe the main features of the Salt March. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to the Gujarat coastal town of Dandi. Volunteers walked for 24 days, about 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British. On 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law, manufacturing salt by boiling sea water. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience. The Congress was reluctant to include the demands of industrial workers in its program of struggle. Analyze the reason. Some workers did not participate in the civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some of the ideas of the Gandhian program, like boycott of foreign goods as a part of their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. So thousands of workers in the Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. The Congress was reluctant to include the demands of workers as part of its program of struggle. It felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. Why did Mahatma Gandhi decide to withdraw the non-cooperation movement in February 1922? Explain the reasons. In February 1922, Gandhiji decided to launch a no-tax movement. The police opened fire at the people who were taking part in the demonstration without any provocation. The people turned violent in their anger and attacked the police station and set fire to it. The incident took place at Chauri Chaura in Uttar Pradesh. When the news reached Gandhiji, he decided to call off the non-cooperation movement as he felt that it was turning violent and the satyagrahis were not properly trained for mass. Describe the main features of the Pune Pact. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into the Depressed Classes Association in 1930, demanded separate electorates for Dalits in the second round table conference organized in London. When British accepted this demand in the name of communal award, Gandhiji started fast into death. He believed that separate electorates for Dalits would slow down the process of their integration into the society. Ambedkar and Gandhi came to an agreement, with Ambedkar accepting Gandhi's position, and the result was the Pune Pact of September 1932. It gave the depressed classes a reserved seat in the provincial and central legislative councils, but they were to be voted in by the general electorate. Describe the spread of non-cooperation movement in the countryside. Non-cooperation movement spread in the countryside also. It drew into the struggles of peasants and tribals from different parts of the India. In Awadh, peasant movement led by the Baba Ramchandra was against talukdars and landlords. Peasants were forced to work in landlord farms without any payments, that is beggar. Peasants had no security of tenure, thus being regularly evicted so that they could acquire no right over the leased land. The demands of the peasants were reduction of revenue, abolition of beggar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords. In the Gudam hills of Andhra Pradesh, a militant guerrilla movement spread in the early 1920s against the closure of forest areas by the colonial government, preventing people from entering the forest to graze their cattle or to collect fuel wood and fruits. They felt that their traditional rights were being denied. For plantation workers in Assam, freedom meant the right to move freely in and out of the confined space. It meant retaining a link with the village from which they had come. Under the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, plantation workers were not permitted to leave tea gardens without permission. In fact, the permission was hardly granted. When they heard of the non-cooperation movement, thousands of workers defied the authorities and left their homes. Who had designed the Swaraj flag in 1921? Explain the main features of the Swaraj flag. Mahatma Gandhi designed the Swaraj flag by 1921. Main features were it had tricolors red, green and white. It had a spinning wheel in the center. It represents the Gandhian idea of self-help. Carrying the flag during marches had become a symbol of defiance and a sense of collective belonging. That's all for today. Do subscribe and like my channel for more videos to come. Thanks.